Good evening, friend. My name is Silas Whitmore, and tonight I invite you to rest easy as we drift together into another quiet corner of the medieval world. Imagine, if you will, the heavy timbers of a crooked tavern, the scent of smoke and ale weaving through the air, and somewhere beyond the chatter, a single voice rising soft and sure to command the room. These were the tavern singers, wandering minstrels, bards, and ballad makers, whose songs could warm a weary heart, stir a drunken crowd, or ruin a reputation with nothing more than a clever verse. Even nobles, with their silks and solemn halls, could not resist the draw of these voices. To some, the singers were a glimpse of freedom, a taste of the world beyond the gilded cage of court life. To others, they were living risks, mouths too quick, melodies too sharp, and a crowd too easily swayed. For in those dimly lit halls, one song could lift a spirit, and the next could topple a name, spreading faster than any herald or scroll. Tonight, we will wander those smoky rooms together. We will learn why these voices, so small against the noise of tankards and laughter, held such sway that even lords and ladies listened with both delight and dread. So settle back, close your eyes if you wish, and let the hum of history guide you toward rest. And as always, if you find comfort in this little journey, comment the number 1. But if you do not, well, do us both a kindness and tap that like button instead. The tavern of the medieval town was never a place of splendor, yet that was the very reason souls from all walks of life sought its warmth. Imagine a narrow lane slick with rain and littered with straw, its stones darkened by soot and the shadows of passing carts. The smell of damp wool horse and distant fires hangs heavy in the air. From somewhere ahead drifts a sound, not a single note, but a low, growing hum. It is the chatter of many voices, the clatter of mugs, a sudden burst of laughter, and beneath it all, faint and steady, the rise of a song. Follow it, and you will find the tavern. The building itself leans slightly as though weary from standing too long. Its timbers creak in the wind, and a wooden sign painted with a shape that might be a barrel or a bear swings idly above the door. There are no polished lanterns to welcome you, no banners to mark its name, only the promise of heat and company behind the door. Step inside, and the outside world fades to a muffled memory. The air is heavy and warm, tinged with the aroma of ale-roasted meat, wet garments, and the faint sharpness of burning tallow. Candlelight trembles along the soot-streaked walls, shadows darting and shifting as though alive. The floor beneath your boots is no polished plank, but hardened earth scattered with straw for the sake of appearance rather than comfort. Tables, if they can be called, that are planks set upon barrels. Benches sag and tilt. Yet, for the weary laborer, the wandering merchant, or even a cloaked knight, it is sanctuary. Here the lines of station blur. The farmer with his dirt-stained hands drinks shoulder to shoulder with a trader whose coat still bears the faint scent of the road. A squire whispers over a tankard near a mercenary, while a minstrel tunes a lute by the hearth, ready to let song rise above the din. This is no hall of order. It is a place where the world for a short while feels bound by shared heat, shared drink, and the soft lure of music. The tavern is more than a refuge of ale. It is the heart of the common town, a place where news travels swifter than couriers and where a lone voice can still the crowd, drawing every ear close. And now, having stepped inside this crowded hall, we must turn to the figures who gave it breath, the wandering singers, whose voices brought joy and peril in equal measure. The singers who drifted through these smoky, crowded halls were unlike any other souls who filled the medieval streets. They were not bound by guild, nor sworn to a master, nor anchored by land or home. They were wanderers, minstrels, and bards moving from village to market town, from roadside inn to lordly feast, carrying their entire livelihood in the weight of a lute, a few patched garments, and the knowledge of countless songs committed to memory. Some had once been students who had left their studies. Others were servants who slipped away from duty, and many were simply those for whom the earth had no place, neither field nor shop, nor hearth to claim as their own. Their craft was unlike that of the smith, the mason, or the merchant. Those men worked in iron, stone, and coin things one could touch and measure. The tavern singer's trade was lighter and more elusive, made of melody and tale of laughter, of sighs, and when courage or recklessness guided their tongue, of sharp truths disguised in rhyme. They learned early to read the mood of a room with a care born of survival, softening a crowd with gentle ballads when tensions simmered, or rousing them with bright, rowdy tunes when mugs grew heavy and voices bold. For the weary peasant, their music offered escape, for the traveler, a comfort in a foreign place, and for the rare noble who slipped into the corner of a tavern, a taste of something unpolished, a world untouched by ceremony and courtly constraint. But the life of such a singer was as precarious as it was free. Payment came in many forms: a handful of coins, when luck was kind, a crust of bread, or a space near the hearth when it was not. One night might bring a loft in a warm stable, another a corner of the common room, and another, if fortune turned a chase into the cold night, by a patron offended at some unintended slight. Their smiles and their skill were their only shields. One careless jest could see them rewarded with bruises instead of bread. Yet despite the hardship they endured for music was a coin no town would refuse. Their songs carried stories from distant roads of kings, fools, battles, lovers, and sometimes whispers of scandal that quickened the crowd's breath. In an age when ink was rare and parchment dear, these singers were the living voices of memory itself. And it was this same gift, the power to carry tales far and wide, that drew the attention of nobles, both eager and wary for the melodies that delighted could, in the same breath, destroy. For the nobles of the medieval world, life behind the thick walls of their halls was gilded but seldom free. Days passed in a rhythm of ceremony and duty, every movement marked by custom, every word weighed for its consequence. At feasts, every toast was measured, every jest rehearsed, and every melody played by musicians trained to avoid offense. It was a life of velvet and restraint, polished to a gleam, but stifled beneath its own perfection. And so when a wandering singer's song drifted through the streets, or when whispers of a tavern alive with laughter and music reached a noble's ear, curiosity stirred a hunger not for luxury, but for something unvarnished and human. The tavern offered a world their halls could not, a place where the air was thick with warmth and noise, where no steward hovered to correct a gesture, and no chronicler lingered to record a misstep. Among the hum of voices and the crackle of the hearth, they could loosen the tight laces of their rolls, cloaked in anonymity beneath a hood or worn traveling coat. There, in the flicker of candlelight and the scent of spilt ale, they could listen to songs unshaped by the rigid court's tales of distant roads, lovers, both noble and lowly battles, told with more mirth than honor, and ballads so full of life they bordered on the scandalous. These nights offered a strange kind of freedom. A noble might laugh too loudly, raise a cup without ceremony, or hum along with a tune unapproved by their household chaplain. They might even share a bench with a merchant or a weathered soldier, hearing stories they would never encounter in their echoing halls. The music, unbound and unpredictable, was a relief from the ordered chants and stately airs of court. It spoke not to their titles, but to their hearts, reminding them for a fleeting hour that beneath the layers of silk and heraldry they were as human as the plowman and the tinker beside them. Yet woven into this allure was a shadow of risk, for such freedom came not without its thorns. The same songs that stirred their spirits might in a moment turn sharp and cut into the pride they carried home. And so, with their hearts warmed, but their senses sharpened, we must now linger upon the true weight of these melodies, their power not only to entertain, but to sway, to mock, and to wound. A song in the dim light of a tavern was more than a simple diversion. Beneath the wavering glow of candles, where shadows quivered upon soot-darkened walls, and the air pulsed with murmurs, and the faint hiss of the hearth, a single voice could shape the mood of an entire room. The singer, perched upon a rough-hewn table, or near the warmth of the fire, did not wield a sword, nor wear a crest, yet their power often reached farther than either. Through melody, they could weave delight or unease, kindle laughter or stir unease, and in doing so, leave a mark deeper than any coin they might earn before dawn. Songs were not merely tunes to fill the idle air. They were vessels of story and sentiment, carrying tales that could soften hearts or sharpen tempers. A ballad of a fallen knight, sung low and mournful, could draw a room into shared silence, heads bowed as if in reverence. A playful ditty about a greedy miller might send ripples of laughter through the crowd, even as the miller himself shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And when daring or necessity pressed the singer's tongue, a sharper verse, wrapped in humor, yet barbed with truth, could strike at the pride of a lord or the reputation of a merchant, leaving the crowd murmuring long after the final chord faded. This was the subtle, lingering strength of song it traveled. What began as a jest by the hearth could by the next market day be whispered in another village, reshaped and repeated until it carried a weight the original singer may never have intended. A single clever refrain could turn into a rumor into a stain upon a name. And so, in a world where parchment was scarce and proclamations slow, a song could outpace both, slipping from tavern to roadside to manor with startling ease. For the patrons who filled these rooms, such songs were a thrill, a taste of shared humor, shared indignation, or shared awe. For those of noble birth, however, they were both a lure and a quiet warning. The same melody that made the night feel alive could, with the turn of a verse plant, whispers that would linger long after the candles died. And so, as the final note drifted into the heavy air, the true power of these singers became clear. Their voices were not just for amusement. They were tools capable of building warmth or fanning embers of discord. And it is to this double-edged gift, the mingled news gossip and whispers they carried, that we now must turn. A tavern singer's voice carried more than music. It bore tidings, whispers, and the subtle tremors of a world too vast to be written down, where parchment was scarce and the pace of messengers too slow. Each song, each jest, and each hushed verse, tucked between melodies, was a vessel carrying fragments of news from towns beyond the hills and tales from roads most listeners would never tread. For many, these fragments were their only glimpse of the wider world, delivered not by herald or priest, but by a voice warmed with ale and worn smooth by travel. A singer might begin with a ballad of a distant battle, telling of banners and blood of lords whose names traveled farther than their armies. From there, the music might soften into a verse about a wandering knight, his bravery embroidered until truth and tale were no longer apart. But nestled between those refrains came murmurs: a merchant ruined by scandal, a noble whose feast ended in disgrace, or a new tax whispered of with dread. These words, set to rhythm, slid easily into memory, and from memory into mouths eager to repeat them. This was the danger and the delight. To the villagers and travelers clustered around their mugs, these whispers were life, a taste of drama, far from their own hearths, a spark to brighten the monotony of toil. But to the lords and ladies whose names might weave through those verses, the songs were daggers wrapped in silk. A single refrain, clever and cutting, could leave a noble's pride in tatters before the week was through, as the tale rolled from tavern to road, from market to manor, gaining weight with each retelling. Few could stop such ripples once they began. To silence a singer was to court suspicion. To punish them too harshly was to feed the tale with new teeth. And so the nobles listened carefully, often hidden behind cloaks and shadows, drawn by the need to know what the common tongue repeated, even as they feared hearing their own name sung with a mocking lilt. For the singers, this gift was survival. Their songs gave them worth, kept the coins coming, and won them hearths on cold nights. Yet every verse carried risk, for the same lips that cheered could turn against them when a line cut too deep. And so, as the echoes of rumor and melody fade into the smoke-thick air, we step now into the shadow that lingers at the edges of every song, the specter of scandal waiting for a single misplaced note. In the dim corners of every tavern where the smoke drifts low and the flicker of candlelight softens faces into shadows, scandal lingers like a silent guest. It waits patient and unblinking, ready to bloom from the smallest verse or the faintest jest carried upon a wandering singer's tongue. For in this world, where most news is carried not by ink, but by memory, a single clever refrain can become more dangerous than any sword wounding, not the body, but the pride and name that a noble must carry like armor. A song need not be cruel to be deadly. Sometimes it is nothing more than a playful rhyme, a harmless jest about a feast gone awry, or a merchant's greed, or a lord who stumbled after too much wine. The crowd laughs, the melody fades, yet the words sharp beneath their mirth settle into the ears of those listening. By the time the sun rises and the singer has moved on, that jest has taken root. It is whispered in the marketplace, carried to the fields, and murmured by travelers on the road, each repetition polishing the tale until it gleams brighter and cuts deeper than it ever did the night it was sung. For nobles, such whispers are poison. Their power rests as much upon perception as upon title, and a single verse can chip away at both. A barbed song carried from tavern to market to manor can turn respect into ridicule, or worse, invite doubt from rivals eager to seize upon weakness. To confront the singer is perilous, for heavy-handed retribution only feeds the tale, adding fresh verses about tyranny and cruelty to the wandering melody. Yet to do nothing is to let the scandal breathe and grow spreading until it can no longer be ignored. For the singers, too, scandal is a blade with two edges. A clever verse can win them favor with a raucous crowd, earn them coin and praise, and open doors to richer halls. But it can also see them cast out into the cold, or worse, silenced by those unwilling to be subjects of another stanza. It is a trade where each word must be chosen like a step upon ice, with care and calculation, for one misstep can end a career or a life. And so as the echoes of laughter fade and the last embers dim, the shadow of scandal lingers, still waiting to see whose pride will falter next beneath a song. When night deepened and the candles burned low, the tavern crowd often shifted like the sea calm, one moment restless the next. What began as a gentle hum of voices, softened by music and warmed by drink, could with the faintest spark rise into something wilder. A spilled mug, a jest poorly timed, or a lyric with too sharp a barb could transform the air from merriment into unease. And in such rooms where ale flowed freely and tempers thinned unease never lingered quietly for long. The crowd, drawn together by song and warmth, was as unpredictable as any storm. A raucous ballad might bring laughter to some, while stoking anger in others, each line echoing louder as the room's pulse quickened. The singer, perched upon their table, or standing by the hearth, could feel it, the subtle shift, the way a cheer grew just a bit too sharp, or how a stomp of boots carried more force than joy. To hold such a room required a skill as delicate as any knight's swordplay, for one wrong verse could summon chaos like a sudden wind whipping across still waters. For the nobles who sometimes slipped into these halls, cloaked in quiet, this rising energy was both fascination and fear. To watch the common folk, merchants, farmers, soldiers, stirred into roaring unity by a simple tune, was a thing unlike any feast or hunt. It was raw, ungoverned, a tide that no herald or guard could quickly command. A noble might sit in the shadow of a beam, feeling the weight of the crowd's rhythm, knowing that if the wrong story or song took hold, the laughter could just as easily turn into chance, and chance into something more dangerous. In such moments, the fragile barrier between entertainer and agitator blurred, and a tavern, for all its smoke and laughter, could begin to feel like a tinderbox waiting for a spark. For the singers themselves, this was a peril they knew well. A melody that lifted the spirits of the many could, with one unintended turn, ignite the few into rage. A crowd enraptured by music might protect them with cheers, but that same crowd soured by insult or intoxication might drive them into the night, leaving them to the cold and the silence beyond the tavern walls. Every performance was a careful balance, feeding the room just enough fire to keep it bright without letting the flames leap beyond control. And so, as the last notes fade into the smoky dark and the crowd's restless hum lingers, we follow that tension further into the lives of the singers themselves, whose days were stitched together by such risks and rewards. For the wandering singers, life was a thread stretched taut, swaying between fortune and misfortune with every town they entered and every song they sang. Their art, though cherished by many, gave them no fixed place, no steady home, and no sure protection. The road was their constant companion, and the tavern their shifting hearth, yet both could turn against them as swiftly as they welcomed them. Each dawn they woke, not to the certainty of work, but to the question of where the day's melody might lead toward coin and comfort or toward cold and hunger. Their nights, though, filled with warmth and noise rarely promised rest. A song that pleased a room could earn a handful of silver, a shared loaf, or a corner by the fire to sleep. Yet the same voice, if it carried a verse too sharp, could see its owner driven out into the dark before the candles were snuffed. Many singers knew the rough touch of a thrown mug, or the sharper bite of a boot heel, when a jest landed poorly. Charm was their armor with their shield, and both could fail when ale was heavy and tempers thin. Few among them owned more than what they could carry: a battered instrument, a cloak patched too many times to count, and a voice grown hoarse from the road. They slept in lofts, above stables, in the straw of common rooms, or if fate was cruel, beneath hedgerows, with only the stars for company. They ate what was given, or traded and drank only as much as their purse or their hosts allowed. To live as a singer was to accept that comfort was fleeting and safety more so. Yet for all the hardship, many would not trade the life. The open road, though harsh, offered a freedom unknown to those bound by land or duty. Each town held the promise of fresh ears and open purses. Each song the chance to be remembered, if only for a night. And for some, the risk itself became a kind of reward, the thrill of holding a room in their hand, of feeling a crowd breathe with their verse, was a warmth as potent as any hearth. But such freedom was not without shadow, for every note carried risk. A song could buy a bed or summon a beating. A verse could earn a noble's smile or their wrath. And so as the road stretched ever onward, the singers' steps remained careful, even as their melodies soared. It is within this fragile existence that we find the heart of their power and their peril, which the songs themselves would soon reveal. Not every song sung in the glow of a tavern hearth was meant only to soothe or amuse. Some, soft in tone but sharp beneath the melody, carried the weight of something far more dangerous, a quiet defiance, a whisper of dissent, a thread of truth that few dared to speak aloud. In a time when proclamations came stamped with seals and guarded by swords, the tavern singer's verse could slip through cracks where no herald or priest could tread, reaching ears that might otherwise never hear such words. A clever ballad could disguise criticism as humor, wrapping a protest in rhyme, so light it passed as jest. A tune might mock a baron's greed by painting him as a wolf in silk, circling the flock while the shepherds slept. Another might turn a failed campaign into a tale of folly, where the proud lord becomes a figure of mirth, his banners fluttering, not in triumph, but in retreat. Such verses, when sung softly to a room of weary farmers and travelers, could stir quiet nods and murmurs an unspoken agreement that the song's truth, though veiled, rang clear. For the common folk, these melodies were a rare voice, a chance to share grievances in a way that felt safe, even joyous. But for those whose names or deeds formed the heart of the lyric, the songs were barbs wrapped in silk impossible to grasp without drawing blood. To silence a singer outright was to risk making their words louder still, for nothing fueled a rumor faster than the proof that someone wished it silenced. And so, lords listened in shadow, sometimes grim, sometimes calculating, as they weighed whether to bribe, befriend, or quietly threaten the one whose verse had turned them into a character for the crowd. For the singers, such songs were both tool and temptation. A political verse well crafted could earn cheers, coin, and protection from those who wished its message to spread. Yet it could just as easily mark them for disappearance, a risk every wandering bard understood the moment their melody wandered too close to power. Thus, the tavern became more than a place of warmth and noise. It became a chamber where ideas wrapped in rhyme took flight beneath the notice of those who might wish to crush them. And so as we leave behind the whispers of politics strung upon lute strings, we must look next to the delicate dance between nobles and singers, how these voices became both weapon and servant in the games of the powerful. Though many nobles viewed tavern singers as unpredictable and sometimes perilous, there were those who recognized their value as instruments, not just entertainers. A voice that could fill a smoke-filled room with laughter could, with the right coin and quiet instruction, turn into something far more deliberate, a whisper that swayed public mood, a song that tarnished a rival, or a melody that softened the ground for schemes to take root. In a world where proclamations felt distant and ink was costly, a tune carried by a wandering bard could reach ears far faster than any herald's scroll. Some lords, subtle in their dealings, would slip a few coins to a trusted singer, asking them to weave certain threads into their verses. A rival's failed harvest might become a humorous tale, told in such a way that the crowd laughed but remembered planting seeds of scorn. A merchant rumored to hoard grain might find his name dancing on the lips of 100 peasants by morning, all humming the same refrain. Even praise could be wielded like a blade. Songs lauding a lord's generosity sung night after night could turn murmurs of doubt into admiration, especially when no one realized whose purse had sewn the tune. For the singers, such arrangements were tempting but treacherous. A noble's coin could mean full plates, warm beds, and safer travels for weeks on end. Yet to be seen as a mouth for hire was to risk losing the trust of the very crowds who gave them power. And worse, to speak too boldly on behalf of a patron was to risk becoming the target of another lord's displeasure, a danger that had ended more than one minstrel's wandering days. Thus, those who took such work learned to weave their words with care, cloaking the hand that guided them so thoroughly that even the keenest ear could not tell where the patron ended and the song began. To the nobles, the singers were at once tools and threats. A well-placed verse could bend opinion, but a single slip could turn the blade back upon the hand that wielded it. Each alliance was a gamble, each coin a seed that might bloom into either triumph or backlash. And so as the melodies drift from hall to hall, and the words continue to ripple outward, we must look next at how fragile that balance could be, how easily a single song could shift from celebration to ruin for singer and noble alike. In the flickering glow of tavern candles, where shadows wavered along beams darkened by smoke, and the air was thick with the mingled scent of ale, wool, and wood smoke, the distance between joy and disaster, was measured in a single verse. A song could lift a room, weaving laughter and warmth into the night like threads of gold, yet the very next refrain, careless or bold, could unravel it all in an instant. For singers, each performance was a walk along a narrow path where every note held the weight of risk, and every word could tip the balance toward coin or calamity. A light-hearted jest, perhaps meant as harmless fun, might land upon the wrong ears. A lyric that drew cheers from most could leave one listener simmering with offense, a merchant stung by mockery, a soldier slighted by a careless verse, or worse, still a noble in disguise whose pride was sharper than any blade. The mood of the crowd, warm and soft one heartbeat, could turn cold and jagged the next, and the same voices that cheered could become a roar of anger, their boots and mugs no longer keeping time with music, but pounding against the singer's retreat. For the nobles, too, the shift was perilous. A song meant to celebrate their name could, by some subtle twist in tone, or by the crowd's own humor, turn to ridicule. What began as flattery could grow into whispers, whispers into rumor, and rumor into a stain that clung far beyond the walls, where the first note was sung. They came to these halls seeking freedom, laughter, perhaps even the thrill of hearing their own deeds turned to verse, yet they knew well that such songs once loosed into the air belonged no longer to the singer, nor to them, but to the crowd, and the crowd was a fickle master. For the singer, every evening became a performance of balanced, coaxing joy, without stirring, ire feeding the room's hunger for mirth, without letting it boil over into chaos. It was an art of instinct, as much as of music, knowing when to soften a lyric, when to let a pause linger, and when to let the crowd's cheers swell just enough, never too far. One misjudged moment, however, could leave a lute splintered, a career ended, or worse, a body left in the cold. And so as the music lingers like smoke in the rafters, we move toward the final thread, the reason such fear of these singers endured even as their songs drew both coin and company night after night. Even as the nights stretched long, and the tavern stayed warm with music, laughter, and the smell of burning tallow, the unease surrounding the singers never faded. For all their charm, for every verse that drew silver into their palms, or softened the hearts of weary souls, there lingered a truth that neither nobles nor commoners could ever quite ignore. The voices of these wanderers carried a freedom that no lord could leash, and a power that no manor wall could contain. A single song once sung belonged no longer to its maker. It slipped into the air like smoke, drifting beyond the rafters, beyond the streets, beyond the town itself. What began as a ballad to ease the toil of farmers could, by the turning of tongues and the stretching of memory, become a weapon, a mocking tale of a lord's folly, or a whispered anthem of discontent, muttered softly at market stalls. It was this weightless, unstoppable nature of music that made it both irresistible and feared. The noble, for all his coin and steel, could not order the wind to still, nor the melody to halt. For the common folk, the songs were a rare taste of truth and release. They could laugh at the mighty sigh over distant battles, or hum a tune that hinted ever so lightly at the unfairness of their lot. For the nobles, though each refrain was a reminder that their power so carefully displayed in banners and feasts could be undermined by something as fleeting as a chorus repeated by a drunkard in the street. They desired the singers for the color and vitality they brought, yet dreaded the shadows their words might cast upon their names. And for the singers themselves, fear was as constant as the road. A melody could earn them shelter, protection, and coin, but just as easily bring the wrath of those whose reputations hung by a thread. Each song was a gamble, and each night, as the candles guttered low, they walked away, knowing that the very gift which kept them alive could one day be their undoing. Thus the fear endured, not of the singer's hand, for they carried no blade, but of their voice, which could stir a crowd, tarnish a name, or ignite a thought that no decree could fully quench. And as we draw our journey to its quiet end, the candles dimming in these imagined halls, we turn now to close the tale with reflection on the humanity, the fragility, and the quiet wonder that such voices still stir within us. And so, as the last embers in our imagined hearth fade, and the tavern falls silent, we step gently away from the smoke and song, leaving behind the voices that filled the medieval night. These singers, with their patched cloaks and calloused fingers, carried something that even kings could not command a gift, that delighted and unsettled in equal measure. Their music, born not of parchment or decree, flowed like water finding cracks in every wall, reaching hearts that power alone could never touch. For the common folk, these voices were a comfort. They brought laughter to weary hands, news to isolated villages, and a sense of belonging that no tithe or tax could buy. For the nobles, they were both an escape and a threat, a chance to taste the unvarnished life of the streets, while fearing the shadow their own names might cast in song. And for the singers themselves, every verse was survival, every melody a wager on the kindness of strangers, the patience of crowds, and the fragile line between favor and wrath. Yet in their songs, there was also something gentler, something enduring. Beneath the gossip and the satire, the fear and the thrill, their ballads carried echoes of shared humanity. They reminded both lord and laborer that stories, laughter, sorrow, and melody belong to all, and that for a fleeting moment, a tavern's smoky air could bind together lives as different as night and day. So as you let your eyes close and your breath slow, perhaps the faint echo of a lute or a soft voice will linger, carrying with it not scandal or fear, but a quiet reminder of how music across centuries still soothes and unites. If this journey has brought you a measure of calm, I invite you to leave a comment with the number 1. But if it has not, well, I would be most grateful if you would all the same tap that like button. Good night, dear friend. I am Silas Whitmore, and I thank you for keeping me company tonight.